What if I told you that despite working harder, studying longer, and hustling more than any generation before them, Millennials and Gen Z have somehow ended up being the poorest young adults in modern history? And it's not because they're lazy, entitled, or addicted to overpriced lattes. No, it's because the financial game has been rigged from the very start. This isn't a motivational cliche. This is math, cold, brutal, undeniable math. I'm Mike, and this is Mike Compound, where we break down the real stories behind money, wealth, and the modern economy. No sugarcoating, no just work harder nonsense. Today, we're pulling back the curtain on what's really happening to an entire generation that's doing everything right, yet still falling behind. Before we dive in, hit that subscribe button, because what you're about to hear might completely rewrite everything you've ever been told about success, saving, and financial freedom. Let's start with a number that should make your jaw drop: 86%. That's how much purchasing power young adults today have lost compared to baby boomers when they were in their 20s. 86%. If a boomer could buy something for $1 back in their day, a millennial or Gen Zer today would need nearly $7 to buy the same thing, even after adjusting for inflation and wage growth. It's not a matter of attitude, it's arithmetic. Now sure, every generation complains about how tough things are. Your grandparents walked to school uphill both ways in the snow. Your parents had to survive without Wi-Fi. And now, millennials are crying about rent and iced coffee. But this time, the data actually backs up the complaints. Because unlike before, this generation isn't just facing a few rough years. They're facing a completely different economic reality. The rules that worked for their parents no longer apply. The advice that once built middle-class wealth is now outdated, irrelevant, and in many cases, destructive. Let's start with one of the biggest symbols of financial success: buying a house. For previous generations, it was a milestone of adulthood. For today's young adults, it's starting to feel more like a fantasy. When the average baby boomer turned 33 back in 1988, the median home price in the United States was about $110,000. Their median household income, roughly $22,000. That means the home price-to-income ratio was just 4:1. In other words, if you saved every dollar you earned for 4 years, you could literally buy a home in cash. Some higher earners back then could pay off their entire mortgage in just a year or two. Imagine that level of freedom. No rent, no debt, no crushing payments. Fast forward to 2022, when millennials hit that same age milestone. The median home price, $433,000. The median income, around $70,000. That's a ratio of over 6.1, and that's not even counting the interest rates that spiked shortly after. Financial experts used to say that anything above 5.1 was unhealthy, even dangerous. But now, we're sitting comfortably above those bubble levels from 2006-2008, the same bubble that ended in disaster. Yet somehow, no one seems alarmed. We're living inside a burning house, sipping overpriced coffee, pretending the smoke is just part of the aesthetic. But the truth goes deeper than just high prices. This isn't just about the cost of homes. It's about a generational shift in how wealth, debt, and opportunity are distributed. It's about a financial landscape that's been reshaped by decades of policy, technology, and corporate control. In other words, millennials and Gen Z aren't losing because they're doing something wrong. They're losing because the game has changed, and nobody told them. And that's exactly what we're uncovering today. Why this generation, despite being more educated, more connected, and more productive than ever, is still struggling to achieve what their parents considered normal life. Because understanding this, really understanding this, is the first step toward breaking free from the illusion of modern success. So buckle up, because what comes next might just change the way you look at money forever. Let's dig deeper into the one dream that defines financial stability for most people: owning a home. For older generations, this was the cornerstone of the American dream: work hard, save up, buy a house, and build equity. But for millennials and Gen Z, that dream has turned into a nightmare with a down payment attached. When baby boomers entered their 30s, they lived in an economy where homes were affordable, wages were rising, and mortgages made sense. A $110,000 house with a $22,700 household income wasn't cheap, but it was achievable. People could save, plan, and eventually buy without giving up decades of their financial freedom. Now fast forward to today. A $433,000 home and a $70,000 income sound manageable on paper. until you actually start doing the math. Because even if you save aggressively, that 20% down payment now costs you around 86 yen, more than the entire home value in 1955. Add in property taxes, closing fees, and skyrocketing insurance premiums, and suddenly the American dream starts to look like an endurance test for the financially exhausted. Historically, economists considered a housing market healthy when the home price-to-income ratio stayed below 5. Anything higher meant unsustainable demand, a bubble waiting to burst. During the infamous housing crisis of 2008, that ratio hit 7. And we all know how that ended. But here's the shocking part. In many cities today, we're already beyond that. Los Angeles, San Francisco, New York, Austin, the ratios hover between 7 and 10. That's bubble-level territory, yet people are calling it normal. It's like watching a storm form on the horizon and convincing yourself it's just a pretty cloud. And it's not just the United States. Across the Atlantic, the situation is even more extreme. In the United Kingdom, the average home price-to-income ratio has been stuck above 7 for more than a decade, sometimes reaching 9 or even higher. For many young Brits, owning property is so far out of reach that the idea has become a cultural joke. But why did this happen? Why did housing, something so essential and once so attainable, become an impossible luxury? It all comes down to a perfect storm of population growth, stagnant supply, and market manipulation. The U.S. population has grown by over 100 million people since the 1980s, yet housing construction has lagged dramatically behind. Supply is tight, but demand is exploding, a classic recipe for skyrocketing prices. Then add institutional investors, massive corporations buying up single-family homes in bulk, turning neighborhoods into rental portfolios. These companies don't want you to own. They want you to rent forever because your rent payments are their monthly dividends. But that's not the only factor. There's also a huge social shift at play. Boomers were far more likely to get married in their 20s, meaning 2 incomes for one household. That simple difference doubled their buying power. Meanwhile, nearly half of millennials are still single at 30, trying to afford rent, debt payments, and bills on one salary. According to Pew Research, 45% of millennials don't live with a family of their own, compared to just 31% of Gen X and 15% of the silent generation. Staying single longer might offer freedom, but financially, it makes homeownership feel like climbing Everest in flip-flops. And if you think that's the end of it, buckle up. Because while home prices were climbing, education costs were quietly exploding in the background, creating the next financial landmine, student debt. If housing is the biggest financial trap of adulthood, then education is the one that starts it all. For millennials and Gen Z, the journey to debt begins before their careers even start, the moment they sign their first student loan. Let's rewind a few decades. Back in the 1970s and 80s, baby boomers could work a part-time job at a diner or a gas station, pay their tuition, and still have money left for books and rent. A 4-year degree was expensive, sure, but manageable. Fast forward to today, and that same degree has turned into a financial ball and chain. The average cost of tuition at a 4-year college now ranges between $30,000 and $50,000 per year. That's not for the whole degree, that's per year. In other words, getting a bachelor's degree in America today costs as much as buying a small house used to. And that's exactly why student debt has become one of the biggest financial crises in modern history, ballooning to over $1.7 trillion. Let that number sink in. That's more than the GDP of entire nations like South Korea or Canada. Between 1991 and 21, tuition prices more than doubled, while the average student loan balance tripled, jumping from around $10,000 to over $30,000. And for 7% of borrowers, that number is above $100,000. That's mortgage-level debt for something you can't sell, can't refund, and in most cases can't even erase through bankruptcy. Meanwhile, the supposed reward for all that sacrifice, a good job, has become harder to find. The number of college graduates has surged by 250% since 1970, flooding the job market with degrees that once guaranteed stable employment. Jobs that used to be entry-level now require experience, and positions that once paid well have flatlined when adjusted for inflation. Today, the average starting salary for a college graduate hovers between $50,000 and $60,000. That might sound fine, until you realize that rent, transportation, food, and loan payments can easily eat up 90% of that income. Many graduates are barely breaking even, working jobs that don't even require the degrees they went into debt for. It's a cruel irony. A generation told that education was the key to freedom now finds itself locked inside a system where learning costs a lifetime of repayment. And the worst part? It's not just about student loans. Credit card debt and personal loans are skyrocketing as young adults try to fill the gaps between income and expenses. According to the Federal Reserve, consumer debt has hit record highs, and credit card interest rates now hover between 20% and 25%. So when an emergency strikes, a car repair, a medical bill, or even a sudden rent increase, most people have no choice but to put it on plastic. That $800 brake job? It turns into $1,200 with interest. That $300 vet visit for your dog? You'll still be paying it off by the time he's a senior. It's not poor budgeting, it's survival. Older generations love to say, just stop buying coffee, stop eating out. But even if you skipped every latte for a decade, you wouldn't come close to affording a down payment on a home in a major city. It's like trying to drain the ocean with a paper cup. This is why Millennials and Gen Z aren't lazy. They're trapped. The system they inherited wasn't built for their success. It was built to profit off their participation. And the scary thing? The debt doesn't stop at education. It follows them into every corner of life, including the way they move, travel, and even think about freedom itself. Because now, even getting from point A to point B has turned into a financial burden. Let's talk about another major financial battlefield that most people overlook: transportation. Because for many young adults, even getting to work now feels like a luxury. The average monthly car payment in the United States has climbed above 7 ultras, with loan terms stretching close to 6 years. That's right. 6 years of payments for something that starts losing value the moment you drive it off the lot. And when you finally finish paying it off, the car's worth maybe a quarter of what you spent. In other words, you're paying mortgage-level money for a depreciating asset, one that also demands insurance, maintenance, and fuel. Now let's add some more numbers to that pain. Gas prices have Millennials and Gen Z paying 40% to 60% more than baby boomers did in their 20s when adjusted for wages. And if you're living in a major city, insurance alone can easily hit $200 to $300 per month. Add it all up, and you're looking at nearly $1,000 a month just to legally move around. For baby boomers, cars represented freedom. For today's young people, they often represent another chain of payments, another monthly reminder that financial independence is slipping further away. And it's not just cars. Every part of modern life seems designed to drain money faster than ever before. From streaming subscriptions and smartphone upgrades to healthcare plans and gym memberships, there's a recurring payment for everything. Companies have turned our everyday habits into automatic withdrawals. But there's one cost that's invisible and far more damaging: social pressure. Social media has turned personal finance into a psychological minefield. Every time you scroll, you're bombarded with people your age showing off new houses, vacations, cars, or effortless success stories. What you don't see are the credit card statements, family help, or crushing debt behind those highlight reels. It's the illusion of prosperity, and it's costing people real money. Studies show that people spend more when they believe others around them are doing better financially. It's human nature to compare, and social media amplifies that impulse 1,000-fold. So what happens? A 26-year-old sees their old classmate posting from Bali or driving a Tesla, and suddenly they're questioning their own progress. They start thinking, maybe I deserve that too. And before you know it, they're financing things they can't afford to feel like they're keeping up, turning envy into an interest payment. Meanwhile, older generations love to point fingers, saying young people just need to stop spending. But the truth is, Millennials and Gen Z aren't overspending. They're overcharged. The cost of simply existing has gone up in every measurable way, while income growth has barely budged. And here's the cruel twist. The more financial pressure people feel, the more they rely on side hustles and gig work to fill the gaps. What used to be extra income has become essential survival money. Millions of young adults now juggle full-time jobs with freelance gigs, delivery apps, or rideshare shifts just to keep up with bills. It's exhausting, it's unsustainable, and it's quietly reshaping an entire generation's relationship with work, time, and self-worth. Because when you're constantly working just to stay afloat, there's no energy left to build wealth, only enough to survive the next month. But this financial treadmill doesn't stop there. It follows young adults into the most crucial stage of life, the years when they're supposed to build for the future. And what they find waiting for them at the finish line is perhaps the most terrifying trap of all, the retirement crisis. If there's one financial reality that truly keeps millennials and Gen Z awake at night, it's this. Retirement, that once promised chapter of peace and stability, now feels like a fairy tale written for someone else. For baby boomers, retirement was a guaranteed destination. They had pensions, affordable housing, stable jobs, and Social Security that actually worked as a safety net. But for young adults today, those safety nets have turned into thin ropes fraying under the weight of inflation, debt, and rising living costs. Let's start with Social Security, the very foundation of retirement for millions. According to projections, the program could face major funding shortfalls within the next decade. By the time millennials and Gen Z reach retirement age, benefits may have to be reduced unless drastic policy changes happen. That means the system everyone's been paying into for decades might not be there when they need it most. Then there's the vanishing pension. Boomers could rely on company-sponsored retirement plans that guaranteed lifetime income. Today, most of those are gone, replaced by 401ks and IRAs, systems that transfer all the investment risk to the individual. Now you're not just an employee, you're your own portfolio manager, tax strategist, and financial planner, all while juggling rent, loans, and a side hustle. And here's where things get even more absurd. Financial experts still recommend saving 15 to 20% of your income for retirement. But when 40 to 50% of that same income goes to housing and another chunk disappears into debt repayments and insurance, that rule becomes a cruel joke. It's mathematically impossible for most people to follow. Healthcare adds another layer of chaos. Medical expenses have more than tripled since the early 2000s. One unexpected illness or hospital visit can wipe out years of savings overnight. Even with insurance, deductibles and out-of-pocket costs can run into thousands. It's no wonder nearly 2/3 of personal bankruptcies in the U.S. are linked to medical bills. And as if that weren't enough, raising a family, one of life's most natural milestones, has turned into an economic privilege. The cost of raising a single child from birth to age 18 now exceeds $250,000, not including college. For many couples, that's the price of a house per kid. No wonder birth rates are falling and young people are delaying parenthood. But beyond all the numbers and charts, the real impact is psychological. Young adults are feeling the crushing weight of financial uncertainty at every stage of life. They're delaying marriage, skipping vacations, and putting off dreams not because they're lazy, but because survival has replaced aspiration. It's not just about money anymore. It's about identity. Entire generations are questioning what success even means when the old milestones have become unattainable. Homeownership, stable careers, retirement, all once considered normal, now feel like luxury goals. And yet, instead of acknowledging the broken system, society keeps offering the same outdated advice. Work harder, save more, stop complaining. But you can't budget your way out of a housing crisis. You can't hustle your way out of stagnant wages. You can't coupon your way out of a healthcare system that charges $5,000 for an ambulance ride. The truth is, the game isn't just hard. It's unfair by design. But here's where things start to shift. Because even in a system this tilted, there are ways to adapt, survive, and eventually rise above it. Not by following the old rules, but by rewriting them. And that's exactly what we'll explore next. How millennials and Gen Z can stop playing a losing game and start building financial resilience on their own terms. Here's the hard truth. The rules that built wealth for your parents don't work anymore. The economy they grew up in rewarded stability. Long-term jobs, slow savings, predictable returns. But today's world rewards adaptability. It punishes complacency. And if you're still following outdated financial advice, you're probably running in place while the ground shifts beneath you. So how do you fight back? You start by changing the mindset. First, stop believing that financial success means following the same checklist your parents did. Buy a house, stay at one job, retire at 65. That path doesn't exist anymore. The new economy requires flexibility, creativity, and strategy. You don't need to own a house to build wealth. You need assets that work for you, investments that grow even when you sleep. If you can't buy property right now, that's fine. Focus on what you can control: your savings rate, your debt, and your ability to generate multiple income streams. Renting isn't failure. Paying interest on an overpriced house for 30 years without financial breathing room is. Second, learn the new rules of money. Not the ones from 1985, but the ones that actually work in 2025. The 30% rule for rent? Useless in most major cities. A safe career? Rarely safe anymore. Instead, build optionality, skills that can earn income across different markets, platforms, or even countries. Don't rely on one employer or one source of income. The modern worker needs to think like an investor, diversifying time, talent, and money. Whether it's freelancing, digital assets, small businesses, or smart index investing, your goal is to build systems that earn for you, not drain you. Third, get ruthless about expenses, not in a cheap way, in a strategic way. Every dollar has a purpose. When housing eats half your income, you can't afford lifestyle inflation. Cancel subscriptions that don't add real value. Trade status symbols for security, because freedom is the ultimate luxury, and it's cheaper than you think. Fourth, redefine what wealth means. It's not the car you drive or the clothes you wear. It's control over your time, your energy, and your choices. The wealthy aren't necessarily the ones with the highest income. They're the ones with the most options. And finally, stop carrying the shame of a broken system. You didn't fail because you can't buy a house or because you're drowning in student loans. You're navigating an economy that was rewritten while you were still learning the old playbook. What matters now is not perfection. It's awareness. Understand the game, and you can start bending it in your favor. That means investing early, automating your savings, and prioritizing financial literacy over consumer trends. It means saying no to short-term dopamine and yes to long-term peace. It means realizing that wealth in this era isn't just about money, it's about adaptability. The generations before you had stability. You have access. Use it. Information, digital tools, and global markets are in your pocket. If the system won't hand you opportunity, create it. Because here's the truth. While the economy might be stacked against you, it's also more open than ever for those who learn how to play smart. You don't need to chase the old version of the American dream. You just need to build your own version. One where freedom replaces fear and strategy replaces struggle. And if you found this breakdown eye-opening, make sure to subscribe, because here on Mike Compound, we're not just talking about money, we're decoding it one truth at a time.